Neck-throughs, guitars, they're like a guy that won't have a beer with you.
I want to hear what's pushing the notes.
Freddie King and B.B. King, Albert King, and let's not forget Burger King.
I don't want to blow my knuckle out.
Stainless steel is the work of the devil.
These go to 11.
From the East Amplification Tone Labs in Baltimore, Maryland, it's the Amps and Axes Show with your hosts, Jeff the Godfather of Low Wattage Amps Bober and Mick Marcelino.
Well, good day to you, Mr. Bober.
Good day to you, Mr. Marcelino. How be you?
Oh, it's awesome. And you know what else is awesome? Our fans are awesome because we've gotten droves of fans.
Yes.
And we can't thank you guys
all.
enough.
Thank you all.
The numbers are looking great. And you know, we got to give the credit where the credit is due. And that's to our good buddy,
Mr. Jude.
Yeah, he's been helping us. We've been helping him. And we thank everybody for coming over and checking it out.
Absolutely.
His little podcast.
No Guitar is Safe.
That's right.
Yeah.
He gets in the helicopter. He goes out. A little bit different than our format because he lives in that area, so he's able to go to their place and they actually jam. It's very cool.
That is so cool.
Yeah.
Someday.
So a bunch of love to him. Yeah, someday we're going to have a cool studio where we can, not that this isn't cool, but we're going to have people.
Cooler one.
Where they won't have a problem getting to where we are.
Right.
We're a little off the beaten path here.
Just a little.
A little bit.
Not too far.
No, but not closer to the airport would be better.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Or a one of the large venues around town.
Yes, exactly.
That would be awesome. So, Mr. Jude Gold, thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. And then, of course, our buddy up north,
Jason.
He's back up north.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yes.
And he gives us the quick lick.
Well, see, it depends when this airs because he could be anywhere.
That's true.
As of recording time, he's back up in the Great White North.
Yes. Yeah, so make sure you go to ampsandaccesscast.com.
Yes.
www. And click on all that cool social media that we have out there. We have a new podcast affiliate that carries our show. Don't know where it came from.
Oh, nice.
But it's a little link underneath the Stitcher. It's called Pod Directory.
Pod Directory.
Pod Directory. It's like Stitcher. They just carry our show.
Nice.
They did it. I don't know why, but they did. And they got all of our episodes out there.
Because they love our show.
They're big-time guitar guys.
There you go.
But there is some, there's a little bit of sad news. And we have to talk about this a little bit.
Just for a little bit.
And
just to send good vibes.
Yes, we have to send good vibes, and we want everybody else out there, too. Mr. Tony MacAlpine.
Yes.
Seems to have a mass in his abdomen.
An issue.
Yeah, and he had to cancel his Asian tour. I guess he's overseas, and he's coming back here for basically emergency surgery. So tough. As far as it goes with the instrumentalist shredder kind of neoclassical guys, he's one of the guys. Him, Gregg, the Jason Beckers, the Marty Friedmans, all them. And, from what I understand, there's nobody better to work with than Tony.
Oh, nice. That's great to hear.
He is just an exceptional musician. He's a classically trained pianist, and he picked up the guitar, and of course it just transferred into the guitar. And I think I have his album Maximum Security. That was one of the first ones that he put out. And, he's...
Another shrapnel guy, right?
Yeah, he's just one of those guys, has his own style, has his own, unique thing. And now, Neely, she played with him, and now he's a 7-string guy. Has been for quite some time.
Yeah, I thought so. Yeah. So,
we just, our prayers go out to him because...
Absolutely. Send prayers, good vibes, healing energy, whatever you got.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Send it out.
Man. That when you hear those stories, you're like, oh, that just I don't like hearing that. I've had too many friends go away because of tumors, and It's just
speaking
not
of
good.
that, and we've been, everybody in the local,
Yes.
in the Northeast area has been sending out good vibes for weeks and weeks now. But our good friend John Palumbo from Crack the Sky is on the mend.
Good.
And feeling like himself again,
Awesome.
and getting back to it.
Yeah.
And they're going to be booking stuff the beginning of the year again. So,
Good.
Yes.
Good.
So he's on the mend.
What's the name of that top right there? Is that Antares? Antares? Is that Antares? Antares?
I would say Antares.
Antares. Okay. So
There's a thing.
yeah, there's a thing. And
There's
once
a
again,
thing.
I'm a little miffed. And the reason that I am is that I work in technology. I believe in the technology. You got to deal with it. It's here. It is what it is. But now they've invented this ATG-1 floor processor, this company, and it's auto-tuned for guitar.
Just what we need.
And I tell you, I listened to it, and you have your guitar. You said PV had one of these guitars that was actually built in. You don't have to tune this guitar. You don't have to tune your guitar.
Yeah.
And you want drop D, you just hit drop D, and it pulls it in.
Now this is not the mechanical tuning that Gibson flooded all their guitars with this year. No. This is
This is a
processor, and that's one thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's bad enough that it's sorry that there is so much technology out there now that you don't even have to figure out songs anymore. You could just go to the internet and somebody's already got to figure it out for you, no matter what you learn.
Yeah.
But to not even need to force yourself to learn how to tune guitar, especially tune guitar by ear on the fly if you have to.
Yeah.
That's going out the window too now. And that's like,
It's
to me,
sorta
that's so
like-
wrong. It's just, it's such a basic thing that you should know.
It's sort of like how they've taken the key and gotten rid of it for the ignition to start your car these days.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, what happened? They've perfected ignitions to go 5 million times the life of the car. Why? Why do I have to? And now I got to carry a thing. And I like that people get out of the car, they forget to turn the car off, and they go into a building, and the car's sitting there running because they got the thing in their wallet, and it just stays as long as it's connected in a certain distance.
Mm-hmm.
The car keeps running.
Wow, that's crazy.
I mean, what is it going to be next? Are we going to get in a fetal position, go in the back seat, and take a nap, and just tell the car to take us?
I don't know. For me, this is one step further, Mick. This is like this is not taking away the key. This is taking away the need for the basic driver's license.
Yeah.
It's like you don't.
I agree.
And the one thing about the guitar that I had seen years ago, and I mean, if you're a proficient guitar player, this is going to be weird because the strings don't have to be to tension.
No.
And
not at all. Not even close.
Can you imagine how weird that must feel?
I don't even
to play a
understand
guitar
it.
that the strings are not to the proper tension.
And here's
it's
the thing.
Be crazy.
Here's the thing, and this is how they do it. And I'm starting to see a pattern now, right? You don't need to take 15 guitars out. You can do all the stuff that you do in the studio without having to take this and go here and go there. And I'm like going, no, when I write music, and I know that you do too, you write it in the ability of going, okay, now I gotta be able to redo this live.
Yeah.
And I gotta be able to redo it in such a way that I don't have to hit a button and my guitar sounds like an acoustic all of a sudden, because they do that, right? So when he does this demo, the kid plugs in this Fender and he strums it. It's completely out of tune. He goes, okay, let's tune the guitar. And he hits the button and you hear it and it sounds like auto-tune. He goes, and then the guitar's in tune. So then he drop D, open G. You pick it. It doesn't matter. 12 string. It doesn't matter. Anything you want. And I'm going, no. It's once again, the fans deserve better.
You know what? I honestly, I think the players deserve better too.
Sure. And I got a cool clip here from Adam Carolla talking about this exact thing.
Really?
With the singer from the Tubes. Remember the Tubes?
Fee Waybill. Yeah, they were actually just in town. I couldn't go see them because we were doing something else.
Really good band.
Actually, I bought tickets. I think that was the show I bought tickets for before I looked at my calendar and realized I had to play that day.
Well, that could be a problem.
Yeah, that was a problem. But oh no, it wasn't. It wasn't them. It was my other favorite. One of the best live shows you'll ever see. Here Come the Mummies. Those guys
Okay.
they're insane live, but they're all really, really, really great musicians. But anyway, this, honestly, you play differently when you pick up different guitars.
Yeah.
There are different scale lengths. The neck feels different. The guitar resonates
Absolutely.
differently.
Yeah.
Even the weight around your neck, everything has something to do with how you play that guitar.
Yes.
You know, you can't pick up a Strat and push a button and have it feel and inspire you like a 12-string Rickenbacker.
No. And on top of that,
And I think guitar players need to experience all those different guitars.
sure.
And then they'll wind up having their favorites and their not-so-favorites.
Yeah.
But you'll never get to do that if it's in a freaking box on the floor.
And here's the other thing too. If you go out and you have a Strat, right? And you're up there and you're playing, and then all of a sudden the audience hears a 12-string, acoustic, but nobody on stage is playing an acoustic guitar. There's going to be a lot of arms crossed, and those guys are the guitar players that are in your audience.
True.
They're going to start questioning what's going on. What do you got? DAT running? You got a CD in the back? You sampling? What do you got? Because that isn't a 12-string, and nobody's going to sell them that it's a 12-string. And that's where you're,
And those kind of processors have been around.
Yeah, Roland had that long ago.
Yeah, there's a few that are around. But yeah, I mean, for me, once again, the bigger
It's just
the aspect
it's just
of
the
that.
feel of it.
Well, it's not only the feel. The bigger aspect is what happens when the box on the floor fails.
Oh, they take a shit all the time. Oh,
Right.
believe me, I'm a test of that. And when they do,
It's just another computer.
yeah, you're just standing there with a bunch of people looking at you, and you're just going, yeah. Anyway,
yes.
Can I play this?
Sure.
Okay, so it's 3 over 340. It's let's see here. It's 345. Yeah, I'm aware. Okay, so 345. We'll listen to this, and then we're
going to bring in our guest.
We can bring in our guest.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tube's been going for 40 years.
First album was 75, yeah.
How was it then versus now in terms of like the landscape and radio play? And I don't know, is it like everything is wide open and everyone thinks it's a good thing, but it's also a bad thing because everyone's cutting a CD and everyone's putting it on YouTube somewhere, and pardon the pun, and
they pretty much all suck.
Yeah,
Pretty
well,
much. Well, I mean, not all of them, but you can with computers today, you can fix anything. You can be completely talentless and have a great record that the computer fixed for you. It'll fix your time. It'll fix your pitch. It'll fix the quality of your play. It'll fix guitar. It'll fix anything. It's just not the same. I mean, there's obviously radio's not happening. There's no radio. There's no record company promo guy that's showing up with a bag of Coke at your gig, just because you're cool and he wants to be cool. And
I've been thinking about this sort of in a more sort of global way, but it's cheating, and all the stuff that's fixed in the studio or in post with all the music and all the stuff that they do to correct everything. It's cheating, and someone goes, well, who cares? Like, why do you care? And it's like, because it takes away from the people who actually have the gift, who can actually do it.
Right.
Because it turns you into one of them when you're not.
Right. And if you're stupid enough to try to compete with that, then you've blown it twice.
Right.
You know, like I did I'm a good friend of Dave Grohl's, and I sang on not their last record, Sonic Highways, but the record before that, Wasting Light. And that's when they decided, they got Mutt Lange to produce, and they said, we're not going to use any computers.
Oh, wow.
We're going to go back to a 24-track machine, linked to another 24-track machine, and that's it. We got 48 tracks. We've got to make the record with that. There's no flying in the chorus 3 times.
Right.
There's no auto-tune to fix your vocal. There's no overdubbing, something that you blew the first time. No, you have to do it right the first time.
Yeah, but by the way, if you're Dave Grohl and the Foo Fighters and you're good enough to pull that off, and others aren't, and I wish that we factored that in a little bit more. Yes,
there was a recent Stuff You Should Know episode all about auto-tune, and basically it's the best and worst thing to happen in the music industry, because on the one hand it makes these marginal acts sound so much better. On the other hand, like you guys are saying, it's making these marginal acts convincing everyone else that they're so great, when in fact I'm putting everyone on the same playing field. But if everyone's an A, then no one's an A.
I'm the only guy on the planet who gets. I'm the only person I know that is fucking pissed off at sampling. I can't stand it when P. Diddy samples Kashmir. I'm like, and everyone gets really defensive. They go, I like that song. I like that song. I love that song. And I go, yeah, of course you love that riff. It's a world-class riff. Who wouldn't love that riff? It's not his. Yeah. He didn't come up with that. No. I can't sample Chris Rock's jokes and go, oh no, I'm just sampling some of his jokes.
Oh, you should do that.
I should.
That'd be fucking groundbreaking. That'd be amazing.
I really should, but I mean, it's not art. Come up with your own shit.
And sampling Steve Martin. Stuff that influenced me.
They used to, back 100 years ago, they would have John Bonham's snare sampled. Right. And you could plug that into your drummer's snare, because your drummer's snare sounded like shit. So you could put in John Bonham's snare. But that was it. All there was back. That was it. That was as far as it went. So, but we never did that either.
So that's it.
First off, I love Dave Grohl more now.
Yeah.
And, God. And I understand the thing that he didn't like about sampling. I get that. I mean, more and more, you think because I get older, I get more jaded, and most times that's true. But,
yeah, we do.
But I mean, there are some, and I was just having this discussion the other day. I do like some songs that are song and then have some rap in them. That's okay with me. I think that's an art form unto itself. I don't like the whole genre around it, but I think it's an art form unto itself.
Okay.
But that's an original song with someone doing that in the middle. That's way different, than somebody and thank God people are getting paid for those samples now. Leslie made a good deal of money.
Yeah, Van Halen was the one with Funky Cold Medina from Tone Loc, and all he didn't even give him credit. And then they said, no, you're going to pay us, and you're going to give us credit. And it started to approach a court, and then he just went, okay, no problem, because Warner Brothers, when they started flexing their muscles, everybody just buckled.
For sure. But I do like the fact that sampling is, unless it's, I mean, if it's used in some artistic way, it's okay. Yeah. If you're using it like if there's some guitar effect that's like over the top guitar effect, but you're using that for an effect, if your song
or the helicopter.
Right, the helicopter. If your song is based around something that you stole from somebody else, write your own shit, man.
Exactly.
Write your own shit.
Yeah. And our guest today, no sampling.
No sampling.
That's right. No auto-tune either.
Awesome. I love him already,
Yeah.
But well,
considering who he plays with, if he ever brought anything in like that, he'd probably be fine in his walking papers, I'm sure.
That's true. That's true. And we'll be back in a few minutes after this quick break with our guest of the week, Mr. Scott Sharrard.
Hey, this is Jude Gold from Jefferson Starship, Guitar Player Magazine. You're listening to Amps and Axes.
All right, and we're back, and as promised, our guest of the week, Mr. Scott Sharrard. Scott, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me, guys.
Thanks for taking the time. I know you're a busy guy on tour with the man, but we'll get to that. We'll get to that.
Real quick, little story.
Okay.
I just reached out. That's all I did.
Okay.
Just sent him an email. He got right back. Sure, I love this. Let's go ahead and do it.
Love that.
I was like, this is awesome.
Love that. Well, thanks for being so expedient there, Mr. Sharrard.
Well, I'm a big fan of the podcast medium, to be honest with you. I was into the NPR ones in the beginning, and then Mark Maron sucked me in, and I've been with him since the first month, and then it just kind of spiraled from there. So,
it's you and Mick.
I mean, I'm into all kinds now. Dan Carlin's a hardcore history, and there's a bunch of them I'm into. I listen to them all the time, so it's a great medium. I love this medium for interviews because it's just it's like total grassroots. It's there's no rules.
No,
right, no rules, and it's renegade. I mean, and you can listen to it wherever, whenever. It's
on demand.
Yeah, it's on demand radio. So,
very it's a pleasure to be part. It's a pleasure to be part of this, and I was happy to see something pertaining to guitar players in particular. I had actually been kind of looking for a podcast to in that realm, and I hadn't come across anything. So I was really happy to hear that you guys had the show, and I'm glad to be part of it.
Oh, very nice, much appreciated.
Yeah, man. And we got some crazy side guys we've interviewed over the past year and a half. So
I love the side guys, man, because most of them are so damn versatile.
Yes. And virtually unknown.
Yeah,
I mean, these are guys you could be passing on the street, not even know who they are.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah, a lot of the greats. I mean, Jimi Hendrix, Jimmy Page. Even I've been into Warren Zevon lately. Even he started out as a sideman with the Everly Brothers.
Wow, I did not know that.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a hell of a training ground to work with. These old masters. I mean, even I read Warren's book recently, which is a great book. I'll Sleep When I'm Dead, and he talks about his experience playing piano and arranging for the Everlys, and it's amazing how big an influence the Everlys had on his writing style. There's a lot of people make that transition eventually. It's much harder to do now than it was back then, ironically, but it is a sort of training ground to be a sideman for people.
Oh, for sure. I mean, and side guys are like the studio cats were, decades ago.
Sure.
All the guys in Muscle Shoals and there's so many people that came out of the studio and went into kind of a solo thing or a band thing, but they cut their teeth, in probably one of the hardest jobs there is. Like, here's a chart, play.
Well, hey, there's no Allman Brothers without Muscle Shoals, because that's where Duane Allman really, perfected his style, was being a sideman for Wilson Pickett and Aretha Franklin and a whole bunch of other great artists.
Wow.
Putting that lead guitar on Hey Jude, that guitar part, with the fills and then that long solo at the end of the record. I mean, that record is why Clapton eventually reached out to. I think it was Ahmet Ertegun he reached out to and said, "Who the hell is this guy on your Atlantic record playing with Wilson Pickett?" That kind of started their friendship.
Wow.
That's so cool.
Yeah,
I saw that documentary. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the whole Shoals, vibe is the whole thing. I mean, I was lucky enough, they actually asked Gregg to sing at the premiere party in New York City, and I was here and Gregg was here, and they ended up bringing me and him on to the premiere party. So we saw the movie. We spent the whole day with the guys. I played about 10 tunes with them, and Percy Sledge was there. He was still with us when this was going down, and spent the whole night hanging with those guys. They're the most unbelievably humble dudes you've ever met.
That's
everything about them in that movie is true that you took away from it. They're just the sweetest, most humble guys. They just know how to play a song, and they're just. There's that whole school of all those sort of small studios, small labels that back in the day were just, Motown was certainly one, Stax, Muscle Shoals, Sun Records. I mean, that's my favorite.
You got the Wrecking Crew, and
oh
my God, so
that's
many of them.
That's my absolute gold standard music, all those places. And they had those bands were bands. They were like garage bands in a way. And they kind of learned together and they lived together. And, it wasn't this sort of, cutthroat, I think probably this started in the 70s. You got the sort of cutthroat, top paid session hired gun guy. I mean, these guys were not those guys. These guys were like just hanging out with each other, just jamming, making records. And in the process, through learning from each other and the artists they played with, they made history, man. They just changed music,
Yeah, I mean, you're right. They were kind of like a band, just that actually never went out and performed as a band, or at least, you know, in the studio days, but they would play together so often that they got tight like a band, and they knew each other well and played off each other. You know, even though there's charts in front of them, once you get the feel of what's going on, you know, it's so much easier to make a really great recording, you know, and these guys did it every day.
Yeah.
They really did. And there's a lot of, there were some other men who weren't mentioned in the movie who were also very important, like Tommy Cogbill. They may have even been mentioned in passing. I can't remember, but they weren't, you know, they didn't interview their next of kin or them. You know, there was Tommy Cogbill, Reggie Young, man, amazing guitar player. You know, there were so many, Eddie Hinton, great guitar player, great singer-songwriter. There was just an unbelievable wealth of these. It was an unbelievable group of guys that was down there, and just changing music together. So you know that movie is just the tip of the iceberg for Muscle Shoals, man.
Yeah, it cool really stuff. Is. Well, I mean, you know, speaking of playing and you know, changing music and cutting your teeth and everything like that, we want to find out a little bit about you. Like, where did Mr. Scott Sharrard come from, and how did you get into the music part of life? Tell us a little about you.
Well, the deal was sealed pretty early on for me. I mean, my dad was a professional musician. When he was in high school, he was in rock and roll bands in the Detroit area and eventually Ann Arbor. And then he made the switch to the coffee house circuit. And, you know, he played gigs opening for Joni Mitchell. You know, at a time he was out in L.A. trying to take it to the next level. But ultimately, the music business wasn't for him. And he ended up becoming a substitute teacher. And you know, they had me. And then, you know, around the age of, well, I can always remember, my dad was always playing guitars around the house. He had a couple old, these beautiful guitars that he bought when he was a kid for very cheap, and it was like a 30s Martin, and which I have now. Actually, he ended up giving that one to me, and then a couple beautiful old Guilds from the 60s, a 6-string and a 12-string. I can't remember the model numbers.
Oh, man.
He still plays them. He still plays. He's actually back to playing music all the time again now in his retirement. But
nice.
That's a whole nother side. I could, you know, tell you guys all kinds of stories about my parents. It's a whole other sort of journey, but. Long story short, he was always playing guitar around the house, and I was very lucky because, you know, they were taking me from when I was very young to concerts all the time. And you know, when I was about 10, I decided I had got bitten by the bug, and I was going to go for it. And one of the most fortunate things I always say in my life is that the first things my dad taught me on the guitar were Jimmy Reed 12-bar blues rhythm guitar pattern, and Chuck Berry. So I spent that whole first year playing Jimmy Reed and Chuck Berry, which, you know, now with all the sort of lives I've lived as a musician, it's still the best music ever to me. I mean, there's nothing without those two guys. There's just nothing, you know. I mean, they're certainly the cornerstone of rock and roll.
Definite game changers, man. Definite.
Yeah.
And honestly, I would just sit there. My dad would sing. My dad's a great singer too. He would sit there and sing and play, and I would just hold down that rhythm, man. I'll never forget when I finally locked in with him on that rhythm, and I knew the form, and I could do the 12 bars over and over again. I was like, man, this is all I need to do the rest of my life. And to this day, I still have that feeling. More now, it's when I get to lock in with the rhythm section, because I also play bass and drums. Like we had, you know, within a couple years, we had all the instruments in our basement, and I was learning them all, and I was multi-tracking to like a crappy Tascam 4-track. And I would take, you know, songs. I'd take those Chuck Berry, Jimmy Reed songs. Eventually, I got into, obviously, the Allman Brothers and the Stones and Zeppelin. And then through learning from my dad and also reading articles with those people, I got into, you know, all the heavy. I mean, my parents always played all the Stax and Motown stuff. So I got into learning, like, the Booker T and the MGs things. And I would learn the Duck Dunn bass part. I would learn the Al Jackson drum part as best I could. Of course, it was probably pretty crappy. I haven't listened to these things in forever. But, you know, guitar was always what I had sort of a natural inclination with, but I would try to put tracks together. And I was doing it that soon. And for me, it always comes back to rhythm, man. It's like I've noticed that, you know. And anyway, that was something my dad instilled in me right away. And then from there, we moved all over because my dad was changing jobs, and I ended up in Milwaukee. in my high school years. So, I mean, I'm really from Detroit. All my family's from Michigan, both sides. But I ended up in Milwaukee for high school. There I got into a high school for the arts. And during the day, I was in the jazz program. And at night, my dad, at about 15, was taking me to all the blues jams.
Oh, nice.
And this period in Milwaukee was magical because it was this, I got so lucky because everyone was listening to, you know, the grunge thing. And I liked that stuff. And I know my friends were into it, and I definitely had a period where I was digging that while I was digging the classics, but I was always all about the blues. And when my family moved to Milwaukee, there was this club called the Up and Under, and they had a jam session. And man, Hubert Sumlin, Pinetop Perkins,
wow,
Buddy Miles, Luther Allison, they would all go there and hang out. So,
wow.
And then there were all the other guys that you'd never heard of. There was this cat who still plays there named Stokes, who's one of the best blues guitar player singers you're ever going to hear. And he was in Chicago back in the 50s and 60s. He knew all those guys. You know, he was part of that whole scene, and he retired up there.
And he still plays there?
Yeah, he's still playing there now. You can go see him at this little club called Maney's all the time there now. But, you know, he was hosting the jam session, and then there was a guy named Willie Higgins. I mean, there were all these Harvey Scales. They were all there, and I ended up working in all their bands and getting to know all these guys and was basically mentored by them. But then during the day, I was going to jazz school, and it was really intense. It was like Fame, you know, that TV show, but like for jazz.
But for jazz, wow.
Audition to get in, you know, and we were doing heavy stuff. Like it was like a 7-piece, 5 to 7-piece group, depending on the year when I was there. I was there from sophomore to senior year, but we were playing 7 Steps to Heaven. We were playing the Kind of Blue album. So I was doing all that during the day, and then I was doing these blues gigs at night. Eventually I got my own band together and called, at that time it was called the Chesterfield Kings. And it was one of my classmates, Sean Dixon from my high school, and these 3 older musicians who were in their 30s at the time, who were fantastic, like top players for Milwaukee at that time. And we had a 5-piece band, and we eventually got a residency at the Up and Under every Thursday night. So, anyway, the point is
back in the day when you could get those, and you know, clubs had residencies. You could play like once a week, or you could, you know, you had a residency for an entire week, or 2 days a month for an entire month, and you know, back when there were places to play and everybody was playing. That's so
hey
cool.
Man, when I got out of high school, I mean, I got my own apartment in Milwaukee. I could afford it, and I was working all the time, and I was only playing in clubs with my own band and playing blues with guys. So it was a special moment, but eventually my buddy Sean Dixon from the band, he was a couple of years older than me, we went to high school together, he got the idea to go to New York, and we found a rent-controlled apartment on 13th Street and First Avenue, which is pretty rare at any time in New York history. So we ended up taking the apartment. I really wanted to move to New Orleans, but he wanted to come here, and here I am, you know, 18 years later, and I've been in New York City ever since. And that's really a whole nother story, but my early years were spent in the Midwest, and I was definitely really formed by that experience. And the Jazz High School, too, we had this amazing program that they had set up where people who would play at the Pabst Theater would come in and mentor us. So Josh Redman came in for a day and mentored us, and then Roy Hargrove and Kenny Barron Trio, and it was pretty cool. I mean, it was, you know, I spent all my time as a kid just hanging out with as many old men as I could find, you know, in any genre, and just immersing myself. You know, how do you do this? And really what it all came back to, that I kept getting from all these different guys over and over again. Mel Ryan, Wes Montgomery's organ player, was a mentor of mine. I mean, I played with him a lot, ironically mostly in blues bands, but I did play some jazz gigs with him too. He's the organ player on all the early Wes Montgomery stuff. All those guys were just about simplicity, man. You know, even like Redman and Hargrove, man, they're just like really deep groove players at the end of the day. So everyone kind of instilled in me, when they would hear me play as a kid, I think the connection across the board with the blues guys, rock guys, the jazz guys I would meet is, oh, well, you can play blues, so you're going to be all right. You know, you just got to figure out the rest of this stuff. So
yeah, but you already had the feel. You know, you already had the feel more than anything else, and you know, they knew that it would work if you had that.
That was the feedback I would get. So
Yeah.
I'd find, they helped me find my weaknesses, which, are still many, of course. So I'm still trying to work on everything else, but I've always felt like I put, the feel, the rhythm, and being a team player, most importantly, I've always put first, and that really comes down to putting the music first, which is, it's about the song and the singer, whether it's me singing or it's Gregg Allman singing or it's Levon Helm singing or anyone else I've had, this amazing opportunity to work with, of these guys who, really are masters of music in their own way. You learn how to support them. And then if you can support them and support the song and play well in the band, you can learn how to support yourself and you can learn how to write and do things. I mean, there's a lot of information and all that, but it's
for sure. And
never-ending. It's a never-ending journey, man, of trying to get everything just boiled down to the essence.
Yeah, and I mean, those are the best side guys, the ones that, and that's why they're side guys, and that's why they continue to get gigs, because they're there and they listen and they learn and they support, and they're not there for their performance. They're there to support the person, who's paying them.
Sure.
And there's a huge difference, And I guess sometimes you get lucky enough to step out, once or twice an evening and really show what you got, But, the bottom line is all the great guys, and we've had this discussion before, all the great guys know how to support the person that put them in that position.
Yeah, because they still, the main act still has to sound like the main act.
Right. Right.
You can't.
Well,
you can't come
that's
in.
Interesting. That's an interesting point, because I've noticed actually with the guys I've worked with, like Gregg Allman and Levon Helm, for example, and then also like Buddy Miles when I played with him when I was a teenager and recorded with him. But Harvey Scales, these guys, man, they actually I get to play a ton on the gig with all of them.
That's
they
cool.
would all they all feature their bands. So
that's
I mean,
sweet.
there's certain singers you can play with who it is all about them, and it is kind of an ego trip. We've all worked with them, and they shall all remain nameless. They might pay the bills,
Right.
But guys like Gregg Allman, in particular, who I've been working with for the last 7 years, and I've been his music director now for his band for about a year, and it's like he's so inclusive with all the members of the band, and everyone gets to stretch out and play long solos and be featured. And even from within the band, he's been singing one of my songs. He actually just recorded it. It's coming out on his live album and DVD. We've written a bunch of tunes together. He's a really inclusive guy with his band.
That's really cool.
That's awesome.
And that's how Levon was. And I was only a sub on the Levon thing. And my band opened for him a couple times. I opened for him with other bands that I played with. I lived in Woodstock for 2 years. And lived down the road from him and went there as often as I could. I recorded with him a couple times. He was the same way with his show, though. He featured his band, and those are two of the best rock and roll shows you're ever going to see. Gregg Allman and Levon Helm. I mean, these guys are the real architects of rock and roll. I mean, these are the guys that everybody looks to. Even the Brits look to. And all the other innovators of that '60s period. And they're very inclusive and open, and sort of like, again, it's like that garage band mentality. It's like we're a gang, that's at the heart of what they do, and that's anathema to sort of that concept of the singer's in charge. It's more like we're a gang, so we're gonna honor the song, and we're gonna put the singer up front because we know everyone's looking at him, and we need to support him and make what he's saying the message, but then he's going to step back and we're going to contribute. It's a little more complicated. It's almost like being on a basketball team or something.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome, and it's wonderful that those guys do that. And I keep bringing up the Santana book, which I'm almost finished reading, but he does allude to the fact many times that because his personnel has changed many times over the years, and he's always bringing up the fact that when he goes out on a new tour with a new bunch of guys, or like half a band worth of new bunch of guys, it's different. It's a different feel, and it becomes it takes on its own life. It becomes its own entity, and that's you know, that's the joy for him and for the audience to see and feel and experience how that group of players presents the material, you know, and he's very happy about that, and it's different every time. You're right. There are some front people out there, singers, players, whatever, that want the same thing replicated all the time, and you know, the players are interchangeable. You just better sound exactly the same as the last guy and the guy before him, which, you know, is cool too. I mean, if you know that's the gig and you know that's what you're there for, that's fine. You know, if the paycheck is putting a roof over your head and food on the table, and you're good with that, and you get to play the instrument that you learned how to play and you're now making a living with, there's nothing wrong with that. That's fine. But the instances like this where people can actually bring something to the music, you know, that's I mean, that's like the ultimate fulfillment as a musician, man. That is so cool.
And you get to jam with Gregg Allman.
I've been really lucky, man. Those are the only gigs I've ever stuck with. I mean, I was doing my own gig, you know, with my own band for many years, and you know, it was kind of a tragedy of timing with my stuff with the business. But I'm still doing it, and I'm making a new record soon. But that aside, you know, all the sideman stuff I've ever done, I've been lucky enough to be in these situations where it's relatively open, and I've noticed that they're usually situations that are very successful for the people who run them as well. So it seems to be a win-win, you know. But again, like you said, it has to be appropriate to the music. And Santana is certainly from the same kind of discipline as Gregg. I mean, it's that whole Fillmore East vibe, you know.
For sure.
And we have Bill Graham to thank also for creating a platform where you could go, you know, and Gregg's always talking about this, you could go see, you know, Albert King, you know, it'd be like Albert King, you know, Vanilla Fudge, B.B. King, and the Allman Brothers, and Johnny Winter, all in one night.
Or even way diverse. Like he would be mixing up the genres. Like, you know, the band to play first would be some jazz band, you know, and then there would be some rock thing, and then there would be something else. He would always mix up the genres to expose people to different kinds of music, you know, and that's one thing that everybody was really, really, you know, happy about and proud of him for. It's you know, he's exposing people to, you know, a larger palette of music, and everybody needs to be exposed to more than just what they're, you know, used to experiencing.
Yeah,
I think it's really important, man. It's music's all about, well, the music I love to play anyway, like blues and soul and like real, what I call real rock and roll, you know, like what the Allman Brothers do is you know, it's all about it's an experience, a musical experience. It's not a rock spectacle, you know. It's you got to have time and you got to develop throughout the show and the set, and I think I'm really inspired by that from those bands from the 60s, you know.
That's awesome. Well, speaking of bands from the 60s, not that you go back that far, but like let's go back to the Chesterfields for a second. I know that name from somewhere. You know, I don't know whether it was Chesterfield Kings or Chesterfields, but that name sounds very familiar. Was there some degree of success with that band?
Well, that band was everybody's favorite band in the industry for a minute. It seemed. I mean, I had, you know, Rob Thomas was calling me over to the studio and playing my record for me, and then playing me tracks he'd done and showing me how he was inspired by it. And we had Ahmet Erdogan was, you know, the head of Atlantic Records, who signed everybody, was super into it, and you know, became a mentor of mine. And it was a situation of timing. You know, I'm 38 years old, so in 2000, when we were doing that project, you know, as a 20-something-year-old man, it was the worst time to be in the music business. The worst ever was 99, 2000, and that was when we were starting and really getting people down to our shows. And it was when boy bands were big, and you could not get arrested if you were doing, especially because our band sounded like it was sort of it was a mashup of styles, but it was definitely based in like soul and blues, but it would go in a lot of directions. It almost had like a Earth, Wind and Fire Tower Power vibe. You know, we had like a 10-piece band most of the time.
Wow.
There's a record called Henry Street Soul, which you should check out. That's the record. We got a bunch of investors, and we did it ourselves because we were so frustrated with these development deals and stuff that we pulled out of the industry and got a bunch of money. And this was before 9/11, so people had a lot of money at the time. We found a bunch of people who had money, and we had them invest in the record. And we made a really, a high budget record on, 2-inch tape with this huge band. And I'm super proud of the record. I mean, I was 22 years old, 21 years old at the time. I had a batch of songs, and I'd co-written some songs with my partner, Sean Dixon. We were pretty much the band leaders, and he played drums and bass on the record. And it never ended up catching on. But
is it still available?
Oh yeah, you can get it on iTunes.
What's it called again?
It's not available as a CD. It's the Chesterfields, and the name of the record is Henry Street Soul.
Henry Street Soul.
We also did a follow-up, which was like an EP that we did with Charlie Drayton on drums, and my buddy Sean Dixon switched to bass for that record. That's also a pretty cool record.
Nice.
Well, right now all the iPods are being turned off, and they're going to iTunes to check out.
Right.
You can only hope. I mean, they're pretty ambitious. I mean, the Henry Street Soul record is a pretty ambitious record, man. I mean, I'm very proud of it. I mean, we put a lot of attention into it, and a lot of love into it, and also a lot of money. So it sounds expensive, but it also sounds, really warm and really. It's kind of a journey from the beginning to end. I mean, it's like 16 or 17 tracks.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So anyway, that was that band. We did our best, and we just couldn't. We toured some, and we had some notable things. We played with Dr. John, and he was a big fan. He became a big fan of the band. And,
nice.
We had all those guys trying to help us, but every time we tried to go get a booking agent, they would want to. Block out our calendar and have us hire a publicist for $5,000 a month. You know what I mean? It was like weird. It was our timing was always bad. And then I went solo and made a few records, but that got kind of hamstrung with my sideman work started to increase at that point. My studio work. So every time I would get a deal on the table for that, I would have something that was either too lucrative or too good on the sideman front that I wouldn't be able to pay close attention. And honestly, I'm still going through that because I still get approached by agents and sometimes labels as well about doing something, but they want a full commitment. And particularly with Gregg Allman right now, I'm with the Allman Brothers have retired, so now with Gregg Allman, my schedule is just crazy. We're working all the time, which is great.
Well, why give up having a little bit of fun? I mean, that must be so awesome to play with him.
Like, I got to be honest, man. It's the best job you could ever have as a guitar player because I'm the only guitar player on the gig.
Wow!
Oh my God!
I was raised on this music.
Right.
My dad used to take me as a kid. I saw the Allman Brothers many times, and I learned all this music before I was a teenager. I could play all of it, and I would go see. It was the Warren Haynes, Dickie Betts years, so. I was seeing Dickie and Warren over and over again, and when the call came in to do this gig, it was like, oh yeah, this is I'm a huge Dan Toller fan, I'm a huge Jack Pearson fan. I mean, I know all their work. So when I was coming into the gig, I was coming in like a giddy kid. I was like a kid in the bedroom again.
Right. Yeah. Hell, I mean, back in the high school days, I mean, hell, we covered half of the Fillmore album. It's everybody that I know was raised on this shit. At least the people that I was playing with.
So did my
day.
band. I mean, when I was in junior high school, when I was 13 years old, I had a band. And I put the kids together, and we all learned the Fillmore East record and the Band of Gypsies record. We used to go play that stuff at high school prep dances. And let me tell you, you've never seen a band clear the dance floor so fast in your life.
And keep it clear.
Can you imagine? When I think about it now, I had a Marshall half stack.
I was just going to get to the gear. What were you playing back then?
No, I had a Marshall half stack when I was a teenager. They'd be playing, Tribe Called Quest and whatever else, and then they'd wheel the DJ off, and we'd come on and we'd play Band of Gypsies. You have these bunch of white kids in a prep school singing about the power of soul, playing the whole album. It's pretty insane, man. There's video of it too. Someone VHS'd it, but we used to do that, and then we'd go in and we'd play these prep dances, and we'd play Freddie King tunes, and they thought we were out of our freaking minds. They thought we were crazy, but we loved it, man. And we used to play all that Fillmore West record, East record. We even got a second drummer for a while in that band, in my junior high band. So I've been trying to ape that music for as long as I can remember.
Wow.
So it was a Marshall and what? What was the axe?
Back then, I used to play a Strat because it was the only electric guitar in the house. Was this white? It was a Strat Plus, but I had like it had the lace sensors,
Mhm.
and I remember I had a Nintendo and all the video games, and I sold all of it at a garage sale so I could get it. And
Oh, wow.
I got it because it was the guitar Clapton was playing at the time, had a lace sensors.
Yes. Well,
You know, it was like-
that's ironic because Warren Haynes, for the longest time, played a Strat that had the painted headstock, and I don't know what the model is,
Wow.
but it had lace sensors in it.
Oh, really? Wasn't it a humbucker kind of thing? 'Cause
no.
Didn't they do something with the painted headstock? Like, it was almost like more of a metal kind of Strat with a painted headstock and humbuckers.
No, you're
and-
right. You're right. That was a lace sensor guitar.
Yeah,
I saw
I
Warren
remember
play.
that.
Wow.
I saw Warren play. For some reason, I was in New York with my dad, and he took me to the Bottom Line when I was a kid, around 12 or 13. He took me to the Bottom Line to see the Warren Haynes band play, and he was playing a lace sensor red Strat,
Yep.
and you can see him playing it on YouTube.
Wow.
Yeah, and you see the
Played it
pickups.
for a while.
And I remember I saw a rig rundown with him one time, and it was the strangest thing because he had a Boss heavy metal pedal.
He loves the Metal Zone.
The Metal Zone,
Metal
yeah.
Zone, wow.
Loves
Yeah,
it.
I'm sorry, the Metal Zone. Can you imagine? It's
Wow.
like
If there's ever been proof that it's all in the fingers, there it is.
Got that right.
yeah. and
Wow.
and didn't he have a Soldano?
Yeah, he still plays
Yes, he
Soldano.
did.
He plays
Yeah.
Soldano and Diaz.
Just not enough gain.
Yeah, yeah, right. Soldano, probably an SLO or something.
Plus
you know,
a Metal Zone.
Plus a Metal Zone. Wow.
Gotta love it, man. That's rock and roll.
And he's got preamps on his Les Pauls.
How do you get that to sound like a real guitar? That's what's beyond me.
Yeah, I mean,
you know?
you've heard him.
Oh, I know.
It just-
up close and personal.
it
But
just
holy
sings.
Jesus! Wow,
Yeah.
that's crazy.
What is in the hands?
It obviously. I mean, I've plugged into rigs where there was too much gain. And it's like you cannot play like classic rock and blues on this rig. You can't do it. You know, no matter what you do, you can't do it. I guess I'm wrong.
We did a Gregg Allman gig in Australia last year at Byron Bay at that amazing festival they have there. And Warren was there, and he came and sat in, and he played. We had an extra super reverb and a tube screamer, and he brought his Les Paul over and he plugged into it. It sounded exactly the same as when you hear him, you know, with the Allman Brothers through whatever. You know, it's just Warren.
Yeah, man.
Totally.
You know,
wow,
he always
yeah.
sounds great. You can plug him into a damn toaster oven. It doesn't matter.
Warren through a microwave. You know?
Why not?
Yeah.
Why not?
And the cool part about Warren, because I've had the pleasure to meet him, just like you're talking to some dude on the street, man.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't waver. He's not the big rock star guy. Matter of fact, when I was talking to him, I think he had some food on his shirt because he had just finished eating. From
He
the
was saving
green
it for
room.
later. You know.
I tell you what, man, that guy's a tremendous traffic cop too. I don't know if you've noticed how he runs, you know, the Allman Brothers gig, or if you've ever seen him on other gigs with a bunch of musicians on stage. I mean, he's right up there with, like, you know, Jimmy Vivino and Paul Schaefer and all those guys. Like,
Musical
he has
director.
that-
Oh, yeah.
he has that talent too.
Yeah, it's nice that that things, you know, he directs people and lets people play, and like you said, Gregg lets people play, and you know, all these guys are from that school. That, like, okay, go, you know, and do your thing, and that's great, man. So how did you wind up getting the gig with Gregg? I mean, what was the transition from the Chesterfields to Gregg? You know, what how did you do that? What was in between, if there's something we're missing in between?
Yeah, well, I was doing my own solo stuff and touring around with that and doing local gigs and doing a lot of sessions back when that was happening, and doing a lot of singer-songwriter gigs, you know, around New York and stuff like that. You know, the usual stuff you do here to survive. And then I was playing with my buddy Jay Collins and his band. And Jay is Gregg's horn player and arranger. So when you know, for a couple years, Jay was trying to get me on the gig, and it was just one of those things where it was like a waiting for Godot thing. You know, after 2 years, I was like, dude, what's, you know, because he's always saying, man, I'm going to get you on, and I know that Gregg had a lot of people in his ear about putting me on the gig. And I think Gregg just wanted to make a change with the guitar chair, but he wasn't really sure how to do it. And he was also having trouble with his health at that time. He was having interferon therapy for his liver. It was before his liver replacement. And I think he just had a lot of stuff going on top of it all. So it was kind of like waiting and waiting to hear what was going to happen. And then one day, and I think it was the way I remember it anyway, I may be dramatizing this a bit, but it was I think the day of the gig. Jay called me either the day before or the morning of this Allman Brothers show, and he said, Scott, it's happening tonight. You need to meet me on the Turnpike in New Jersey, and I'm going to drive you to Camden, and you're going to sit in with the Allman Brothers.
Holy crap.
And I said, okay, well, I guess I'll grab my guitar and I'll see you there. So I met him in his car. We get to the arena. It's a shed, I think about a 5,000 person shed, and we get there, and I go backstage, and first thing I did is meet Gregg, and Jay introduces me to him. And Jay has now been in the band about 15 years. So at that time, he'd already been in the band for about 7. So, wow. He's always been good buddies with Gregg. So Gregg comes in, and, I get introduced to him, and, we start chatting, and, he's always just a lovely, gracious guy. I'm not just saying that because he's my boss. He's like, puts the music first. And he's just got a really humble attitude, especially around musicians. He's always looking to learn and chat, and he's got an infectious enthusiasm for blues in particular. So right away, he went at me with, hey man, it's great to meet you. And then he said something like, so you know who Wayne Bennett is, right? And I said, of course, Gregg. It's Bobby Bland's guitar player. I love Wayne Bennett. And he goes, oh man, that's just great. He's like, you know all those licks he plays on Further On Up the Road and Stormy Monday? And I said, of course, I love that stuff. And he's like, all right. And then I went and sat in, and I met Warren and Derek, for the first time. So, I mean, I got to be honest, man. I was at the side of the stage. And at this point, I had played with, as you know, I'd played with a lot of great people when I was a kid. And I had played with, Levon a bit at this point, and a lot of other just amazing musicians. So, I felt like, I was pretty confident in my ability to at least not embarrass myself and hopefully get the gig with Gregg in the process. But I remember calling my wife from the side of the stage before I went on, and I said, honey, I'm looking out in the crowd, and I'm seeing a bunch of kids in tie-dyed shirts who are about 12, 13, 14, 15 years old. And I'm seeing myself, I'm about to go play with this freaking band. Wow. I don't even, and I'm auditioning for this man's gig, and I don't even know what to do with myself right now. And she was just like, God bless my wife, man. She's like my, she's my angel, man. We've been together 14 years, and she's just an absolute amazing barometer for what to do at all times. And she said to me, she's like, just don't worry about it. Just go jam and have fun. And I was like, you know what? This is what I got to do. So I just went out and I played, and we did some, I can't remember. We maybe played You Don't Love Me or something. And we had a great time, and then after that it was like, okay, it's cool. I kind of had to go. It's kind of like traveling through a black hole or something. It's like got to the other side of it. I'm like, okay, it's not some supernatural stuff. It's just, we're all cool. We're all just musicians. These guys are super humble and super cool, and no one's making any judgments. It's about the music, and that was, kudos to them as being, musicians who could treat anybody the way they, however they want, really, with their status and how they play. But their vibe on stage is completely open, and I felt that right away, and I felt comfortable to play. And then they had me back on the encore, and then I had the gig, and that was it.
Wow. It's really nice that they're all like that, and they should be, because, really, what does being a dick get you?
Yeah. And here's the thing.
It gets you, people don't want to play with you.
and the other side of it is, worst case, he doesn't get the gig, but you jam with the Allman Brothers.
Totally.
Yeah, and then subsequently, actually, once I had the gig with Gregg, then, subsequently I ended up sitting in with the Allman Brothers another half dozen times or something. They would always have me down at the weekend to play. And,
nice.
That is awesome.
And then they come to play with us. We were, the first year Tedeschi Trucks was touring hard in Europe, we were over there with Gregg, and we did a show with them, and they came and sat in with us. And, Derek and Susan are always great to have down. They're just... It's an amazing crew of people, man. They're really doing their best to protect the music, man. They really all live and breathe and sleep and eat blues and soul.
Yeah.
And if you do a steady diet of that when you play, great rock and roll is going to come out. I mean, that's kind of the formula. That's everybody from Jerry Lee Lewis and Elvis Presley to the Stones and the Allman Brothers, you know. I mean, damn, man, even Pink Floyd listened to the blues, you know. I mean, David Gilmour can play the shit out of the blues.
You know, he is the king of pentatonics that don't sound like your traditional pentatonics the way he plays them. You know, it's just his phrasing is just so unique, but it's all blues based.
And if Chuck Berry wasn't alive, AC/DC wouldn't be on the planet. Because they that's their number one guy,
right?
Hey, with Chuck Berry, don't forget there is no Bob Dylan without Chuck Berry. No way.
Yeah.
I mean, you want to talk about somebody telling stories with lyrics, these complicated stories with all these words in rhythm. I mean, that's Dylan's whole style, man. It's like Woody Guthrie and Chuck Berry mashed up, and you got Bob Dylan. But you got to have Chuck Berry.
Wow.
No Keith Richards without Chuck Berry. He'll tell you that himself.
Oh, that's for sure.
Yeah,
that's for sure. Yeah, that's
a lot of music that man is responsible for, and he's still walking the earth. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's it. All goes back somewhere, you know. And those are the roots, you know.
Oh yeah,
that's the roots. So let's get into some of the gear that you're playing now with Gregg. I mean, what's your rig like today, and how does it differ from you used to have the big Marshalls and everything?
I mean, my benchmark tone for any gig is I am a 60s blackface Fender freak. I mean, I've had all of them at one time or another. I've had to sell them and move through them as it goes. My favorite amp of all time is the Fender Vibrolux Reverb. I have two. One's a 66 and the other's a 67. They're both blackface.
Nice.
I got them both on eBay back when eBay was brand new and nobody was buying these amps. So I think I paid about $1,100 or $1,000 a piece for them back then.
Mm-hmm.
They go for around $2,000 now, I think. So with Gregg, I mean, I've been through a lot of rigs. I got to be honest with you. I started out with two Vibroluxes, then I went to a Super Reverb and a Blankenship. Then I had a Super Reverb and a Fuchs, and I was just constantly trying to. I like to have. My ideal is to have 10-inch speakers and 12-inch speakers combined. So I am always running two rigs in parallel. That's my recording and touring with Gregg rig. If you see me playing a club, I'm playing a Vibrolux. If I'm recording or I'm touring with Gregg or somebody else where I have a tech who's setting up all my stuff, take 2 amps. So the whole theory is, I have one of those radial switchbone things. To send my signal out, and I can flip the polarity with that if I need to or whatever, and then I just run the two rigs in parallel all night. And I find that having that combination of two separate amps, one with 10-inch speakers and one with either 12s or 115, I can get a really great spread in the EQ of the sound, and to me it gives me great bandwidth and real sort of mid-range, honk that goes through the whole rig. So that's kind of my formula right now.
What's the 212 amp?
That's the one that's always evolved. It's always been a Fender Blackface on one side, so it's either a Vibrolux or a Super Reverb vintage 66 on one side, and then the other side has always changed. And I can't even remember. I've been through so many, but right now I am, fingers crossed, I think I have found the perfect complement to Fender Blackface amps, which is this new line of Supros that David Coltai is making from Pigtronics in Long Island. And I have a Supro Thunderbolt Plus 115,
yeah.
And I am a huge, huge fan of those old Fender Vibroverbs. I played a Blackface at the House of Guitars one time. They were even kind enough to bring it down to my gig that night in Rochester, and I used it. It was one of the best sounds I've ever heard, and I just can't afford that amp. It's like $6,000. I think they made them for like 1 year. Stevie Ray used to play one.
I was just going to say that was one of Stevie's amps for sure.
But this amp is the closest I've gotten to it as a 115. It's got a Jensen, and he made one for me that's quiet because we have a real stage volume problem with Gregg. Because he stands up and plays guitar on the gig, and he stands basically we stand right next to each other, and he stands right in front of my rig. So it gets really tricky with volume going into his microphone. So I've been messing around with these rigs, and this Supro has got a variable wattage. It's 15, 20, or 25 watts, so I can kind of adjust it and tweak it to the room.
Cool.
So that's where I'm at now. I got my Vibrolux, my 66 Vibrolux, and my Supro with 115, and I run them in parallel. And that's the rig at the moment.
Well, hang on to that Vibrolux, because I just looked on eBay. They're going anywhere from $3,000 to $3,300 for a 67.
Wow. Yeah,
for
they're
67.
The best, man.
For a 67, it was like 166 too on there. They were right around the $3,000 mark.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I blew out. I had the original speakers in mine. They finally blew, and I got Celestion G10 Vintage in there now, which I love. I love Celestion speakers. So,
well, you should do this. You should do the Stevie thing and put in 10-inch EVs.
That would not be the right thing for this gig, but certainly for my own gig, I might be able to get away with that.
Yeah, that was great. He used to have 2 Super Reverbs with 4 EV10s.
And only weighed 900 pounds.
Exactly. And he would blow them too.
Oh my
Renee
Lord.
used to have in the cases. He used to have spare 10-inch EVs because he would blow them. God knows how.
Those things are like rated at like
200
watts.
Yeah. So there's 800 watts worth of speakers, and he would blow an EV10s. Yeah,
well,
they would send some back all the time to the factory.
God bless Stevie Ray, but he is obviously one of the giants and a huge inspiration to all of us. But the folklore around his gear has just been a poisoned well for guitar players for I don't know how long. I mean, that shows how good he was. At the same time, it's like, again, it's a thing where he could have just plugged into a Princeton Reverb and it would have been one of the greatest guitar players in history. But the fact that he used like Dumbles and all these different heavy sets of strings and it just drives guitar players and magazines into a frenzy.
Oh yeah.
And I think it's one of the sad things with Stevie Ray is people just get so obsessed with that part of the folklore of him, and really, it all goes back to it being in the hands and what's comfortable for you. I've had a lot of people ask me about, should I be playing with 13s? And it's like, yeah, well, if you want to put a frickin' 8-ball of cocaine and whiskey and then go on stage and play, I think you should play with 13s because I don't think you're going to feel anything.
If you want to put an 8-ball,
why not?
Rub an 8-ball on your fingertips and go.
Yeah. What do I care?
Well, let's be like Stevie, down to the cocaine and the coffee.
Yeah, I mean, man, it's like, it's all about what's comfortable for you, with any of this stuff, Shit, play a Boss Metal Zone. Who cares? If you sound like Warren Haynes, who cares?
Yeah.
I just got, the greatest example, and you guys know about Jack Pearson, right?
I know the name. Jack Pearson.
Okay, well, look, you guys, you got to get Jack Pearson on the show because he might be the best living guitar player. I mean, he was in the Allman Brothers for a couple years.
That's where I know the name from, yes.
He's a Nashville session cat now. Doesn't leave Nashville very long, but he's easily the best guitar player in Nashville. And I mean, this guy is an incredible human being. He's a great hang. He's so knowledgeable. He can play every facet of Wes Montgomery to Albert King to Duane Allman.
Wow.
His ability with the slide is staggering. I mean, this guy can do everything. And he's playing a $90 Squire Strat on his gigs.
Well, if something happens to it, no big
loss.
Guys,
you gotta, and your listeners, everything starts with YouTube these days. Just go to YouTube and just start with Jack Pearson, and you will not stop. You're gonna have to turn your phone off for a week and just sit with the computer and deal with it, because this is just somebody you got to deal with. This guy also sings and writes great tunes too. He's just like a bottomless well of inspiration for so many musicians. I mean, all the Nashville cats. I mean, everyone from Jason Isbell and Pat Robertson and everybody goes to see him. He's the guru. So he's probably one of Derek Trux's favorite guitar players. Jimmy Herring. I mean, they all go see Jack. I mean, Jack's the guy.
Well,
we'll try to get him on the show.
Hopefully, we'll be in Nashville soon, and maybe we'll get a chance to go see him too. And have him on the show.
Hell yeah,
yeah, for
Why
sure.
Not?
Yeah,
he would love to be on the show, and he's a guy, you know, he also turned me on to these Wiegand picks. Have you guys ever heard of these?
No.
Well, Jack turned me on to two of the most important things in my arsenal right now in the last year. And there are things that he discovered, I think, recently in the last couple of years as well. One is the Wiegand picks. It's a guy in Norway. And Jack also plays great mandolin. And it was like I think he was using it for bluegrass or mandolin playing, and he started playing it on his guitar, and he found it just fit. And I had the same experience when I started using the pick. It's a large pick. It's got some holes in it. The TS9, I think, is the one, or TS09, I think. I forget the number of model, but Wiegand picks is the brand, and they're expensive. I mean, I was telling Jack last time, I said, man, you got a $7 pick and a $90 guitar. How does this work?
Pretty well, actually.
How crazy is that? You know, but it's a great. I mean, it's a $7 pick. But
Yeah, I'm
it
looking
might
at
even
it.
go for more than that now. I don't know, but
it's $20 euro and then $20 US for a package of 4.
All right, so
oh, okay. So that's a good deal. Actually,
yeah.
$20 euro. So that's about right. It's like $6 or $7 a pick.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Not
So
something
plus shipping,
not
so,
something you regularly throw out to the audience.
No,
you know?
well, it's like our buddy Vinny over there, VPick.
Yeah. Exactly.
The other thing Jack turned me on to is that I've been working with Dunlop for a long time, and I love all the stuff, especially the MXR stuff. And he turned me on to the MXR Custom Badass Overdrive with the bump switch on it, and I love that pedal, man.
Yeah, that thing is relatively new, right? Year or two?
Yes. I mean, it might be a couple years old.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
I hate pedals. Like in the studio, I don't use any. And on my own gig with my band, I very rarely use pedals. I just crank the amp up to 6 or 7 and just go for it. But with, like I said, with Gregg, I've been trying to control my stage volume and still get a tone that kind of mimics, you know, sort of I'm going for kind of a blend of like the Marshall Fender thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been using this pedal to do it, which is, I think, why Jack was using it. And I just absolutely adore this pedal. And it's, you know, it's like $90 or something.
You know, it doesn't have to be expensive to be good, man. I mean, like, go back to what you said and what we say all the time. Whatever works for you.
Yeah.
You know, whatever works. That's the beauty of this, you know. And some guys have made incredible sounds with unincredible gear, you know. And it's,
of course,
it's a great thing. Yeah, you were talking about picks. A friend, I ran into a friend of mine the other day who pulled out a pick from who? Oh, it was Griff from Cowboy Mouth.
Yeah.
He pulled out a pick that my friend Island had given him, and a normal pick is just on one plane, one horizontal plane. You know, you hold it between your thumb and index finger, and the point is on the same plane as the pick. This one, it's rotated 90 degrees. And you get the point and the side. It's like if you held the pick sideways, you get the side and the point instead of the flat and the point.
Wow.
I've never seen anything like it before. And he said it helps with his 64th notes. So,
I'm going to make sure I don't buy that pick.
yeah, it didn't sound like anything I would use, but very unique. So there's all kinds of
Oh yeah, they've rented the picks 95,000 times.
Yeah.
Still are, by the way.
Yeah. Oh yes, absolutely.
We don't need any more notes in the world.
Thank you. I am of that school for sure. So outside of Gregg, your band is what, the Brickyard Band, right?
Yeah, Scott Sharrard and the Brickyard Band. We're based here in New York City, and we have, if anyone comes to town, when I'm not on the road, I play every Thursday night at an amazing club in Brooklyn called Barcord, and it's called Barcord, and you guys will appreciate this pun because it was a great guitar store for many years, and then the owners bought the place and turned it into a bar, and they still sell guitars and picks and strings and everything, but it's a bar that specializes in mezcal drinks, and they have a huge outdoor patio as well. It is the coolest place you can possibly hang out.
I love
They have
this
an
place.
amazing jukebox that has all the old soul music you want to hear and jazz, and you come in and you have some mezcal cocktails, and then we set up a 7-piece band sometimes with horns, and I've carried a lot of I have a lot of special guests that come down. We've had some great guitar players, some great 2-guitar nights with Scott Metzger, who's been playing a lot with Phil Lesh, and Teddy Kumpel's done it. We're going to get some more. We're going to get Schmeens from Let Us Down soon, hopefully. But, it's just it's like our clubhouse. And we play all night, and it's free to get in.
Huh.
And we're there every Thursday night when I'm not on the road. So that's kind of what we're doing at the moment. But I just got a new management team, and we're making plans. We're talking to a couple labels who are interested, and we are definitely going to go to Memphis and make a record sometime in the next 6 to 12 months. We're still shopping studios, but there's an amazing band from Memphis called the Bokeys, and actually 2 of their horn players are now in the Gregg Allman band. And we're going to use them, and then we're also going to farm out some of the original high record session guys. The Hodges brothers and Howard Grimes, who play on all those great Syl Johnson and Al Green and Ann Peebles records. They're going to come in and play on some tracks. And it's going to be a hell of a record, man. I've got all the tunes written, and we're going to try to, just do the best we can with it. I know the back catalog of records I have seem to be getting out there, because I was just in Amsterdam, and walking out of the venue, I ran into a bunch of people, and they know all my records somehow. So at some point, I got to figure out how to get out there and take care of business. But, it's hard with being out with Gregg. But New York is fun because we have this venue, and it's in a cool part of Brooklyn, and there's some nice restaurants next to it that are hipstery. So we get a nice crowd, and a lot of great musicians come by and hang out.
You live in Brooklyn as well?
No, I did at one time. I live in Harlem.
Oh,
actually,
wow.
My wife and I actually we took the leap and bought a place here. But before we were here, we moved back to the city 3 years ago. I was saying earlier, we were in Woodstock for 2 years. And that's a whole nother actually musical diaspora that's really interesting. Obviously, I'll link to Levon, but there's a whole group of musicians I'm still connected with up there, like Jimmy Weeder. Have you guys ever? You guys talked to Jimmy, didn't you, at one time? Jim Weeder?
Yeah, he was on with Mitch Colby.
Yes.
Weeder's fantastic.
Yeah.
Man. I got to know him when I was up there, and we still play together occasionally. We actually just did a B.B. King tribute gig at City Winery a couple weeks ago.
Oh, nice.
And he's fantastic, man. He's a great player. I met him when I was up there, but that was a whole separate experience. But New York is kind of interesting with that because, you have like the Brooklyn scene, which I lived there for about 6 years. I got to know those players, and then you have the Woodstock scene, and now I'm in Harlem, which is actually another whole diaspora of cats too. You have like the Oregon jazz thing up here, and it's a whole nother bag, So, but New York's an interesting place to live. I mean, I've definitely, been banging my head against the wall a couple times in the last 18 years because New York is a fickle place. It's no wonder that Andy Warhol was from here. It is kind of about like, some of it is about like, let's just tear up these paintings and start over. There's a lot of that, Let's just tear this building down and let's just try something else. What the hell? Who cares that it's been here since the 1500s? Let's keep it moving, And that kind of bleeds throughout the musical styles too, A lot of things here are disposable that are actually really precious, which is the tragedy of it, but it's also the creativity of it. So it's a trade-off. Unlike, for example, Memphis or New Orleans or Nashville, where the environment is like, it's almost like a European mindset, especially with the South. You see, in the South, you see more of like that thing you see when you go to France or Spain or somewhere like that, where people are steeped in their culture and they're all about protecting it. And the music is the cornerstone of that in the South when you go to the metropolis. And they invented rock and roll. I mean, all this damn music is from the South. It doesn't, we can talk about Chicago and Detroit, and certainly I'm very attached to, that's where I'm from, is that scene. But man, all those cats that came there, they came from Muscle Shoals. They came from Mississippi. They came from the Mississippi Delta. They came from New Orleans. I mean, it's all from the South. So that's the difference, I'd say, with New York, is that, New York doesn't really, outside of jazz at Lincoln Center, they don't really protect anything.
Doesn't hold much sacred, but
Wynton Marsalis is over there, with a couple muskets holding down the fort.
That's for sure.
That's one of the greatest musicians we've ever had. In terms of his facility and expression, and he's doing his best to protect, what his definition of jazz, which I think is great. But outside of that,
very eloquently too, for sure.
outside of that institution, man, you know, in New York, everything is pretty transient and disposable, and unfortunately very business-minded because everything is so expensive. But then again, the quality of musicianship here is about as high as you're going to get anywhere.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Across the board, genre-wise. I mean, another guy who I met in the city is John Harrington. Are you guys familiar with him?
Yeah, he'll be on in a couple of weeks, actually.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
John's fantastic, man.
I love John, yeah.
You know, John's fantastic, and he's kind of, to me, he's like the gold standard of like what a great New York guitar player is, because he can play every genre incredible, you know.
Yeah.
But he's a guy, I think, who's basically, you know, more steeped in jazz. I mean, I'm kind of the opposite. I was steeped, born and bred in the blues, and then I learned to play jazz. And when I came to New York, ironically, you know, people say, you know, you play jazz and you starve. In New York, you play jazz to survive. That's
right.
the weird thing. You know, New York's a jazz town. Like when you play a wedding gig here, you better watch it, man. If you don't know how to play jazz, because you know, when I was playing wedding gigs here, man, you show up on that gig, you play Cocktail Hour, these cats they're going to pull out Wayne Shorter songs. You better know how to play over those chains. You better know how to play Juju, because they're going to call it at a damn wedding cocktail hour. You know, so I mean, you know, right
Go
away,
on, let's see what he's got.
Let's see how to get through this shit.
Right.
You know, that's a New York thing. That ain't going to happen in Memphis or Nashville or New Orleans. You know, you're going to show up on a gig there, and the first order of business is going to be having a drink and having a good time. You know, in New York, it's like cats are not playing around, and that has its benefits, and that has its defects too. It has an up and a downside. And in my soul, man, I'm a blues, you know, soul music guy. I mean, that's and a real Southern rock and roll guy. That's what I've always been. That was the music I was raised on, and I learned to play jazz to survive, and I love jazz music. I mean, you come to my house and I'm going to be playing Miles Davis till the cows come home. You know, I mean, that's my favorite music to listen to, man. But
nice.
But in terms of playing, you know, I mean, that music informs me, but when I go to play, you know, I'm shooting more from the hip, you know.
Yeah. Well, that's you know, where you're born and bred, man. That's where the soul is, you know, and that's awesome. And you know, to be able to just, you know, not gravitate, but to extend that into jazz, and to be able to make your way in a jazz world like New York, you know, and you know, just play the gigs there and have people invite you back to play more of them. Hell, man, you got all the bases covered. You know, you can play what you want.
Man, like Brian Charette in particular, this organ player who's one of my best friends. I mean, I met him playing blues gigs, but I played in his organ trio, his jazz organ trio, for many years. And man,
wow,
he taught me how to play all the, you know, the deep Herbie Hancock, Chick Corea, you know, Wayne Shorter, you know, more of that modern 60s going into 70s jazz that's still singable and still soulful and grooving and not brainiac-y at all. Like really soulful, incredible music that's very difficult. And he taught me how to play that music. And you know, I had a period where I did that, and it was a weird sidebar in my life, but it still informs me, and trust me, you know, I have to pull that stuff out sometimes. Sometimes when you're playing Dreams with Gregg, you know, all that stuff can come into play, all that kind of training, you know, that helps you to pull it in different directions, you know.
Yeah, it just depends where the song wanders, you know, but it's you know, even if it was a strange experience, I mean, for me, and I'm sure for you too, it's as long as you're learning something from it, you're taking something away from it, man. Yeah. I don't care how weird it is. It's freaking good. Yeah, you know, it matters. It matters.
Yeah, I've never cared about style. I think style is completely irrelevant.
Yeah,
I mean, it's for me, it's all about soul. You know, whether I'm listening to Glenn Gould play Bach, I'm listening to Miles Davis do Sketches of Spain, or you know, I'm listening to frickin', you know, Levon Helms sing an old bluegrass song, or I'm listening to Gregg Allman sing his song, or sing some Bobby Bland. I mean, that's all the same stuff, man. I mean, that's, you know, it just comes down to a baseline of expression at the end of the day. And I mean, all these genres, we can talk about genres, but at the end of the day, that's all, you know, some bean counter stuff. I mean, that was all thought up by a guy to figure out how to make some money.
Yep. You know, what's funny is I saw Tony Bennett's documentary.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess
I love that documentary.
Yeah, and the one thing I liked in there was he doesn't like demographics. He doesn't want to be, because if you put his music into a demographic, it's going to be a lot of white-haired people in the audience. If you look at, you know, because he's 80-some years old, right? And he said, no demographics. And so he had John Mayer, and he had, Michael Bublé. He had a bunch of people on this album that he did. It was in 2012.
Right. He did something with Pink, right? I think. Was it Pink?
No, it was the girl, Amy Winehouse.
He did Amy Winehouse, but
I
think he was doing something with Pink too.
Maybe, but anyway, that was his big thing. He didn't want that because, like Scott said, it's the bean counters. They come in, they go, "What's the demographic?" So they can like target this audience. He goes, "No, this music is timeless." He goes in, and it just goes across, generations.
Well,
which it does. I mean, it really.
But there are bean counters involved there because they're going, okay, well, if we bring in these new artists,
of course,
and we do, I mean, Carlos was the first one to do that with Supernatural. He was the first big success with something like that.
Yeah, because you're pulling other
and
other
that was
people
Amit, I believe. Amit Artigan and
no, that was Clive.
I'm sorry, it was Clive. Yeah, that was Clive. Yeah, I'm sorry. But that was the first huge success of like. Putting a bunch of like almost crossover kind of artists, to pull that into this particular genre, or pull this into this genre or this demographic,
and I think it wakes people up because my 14-year-old daughter has like every Bublé album, and if you listen to that stuff, he does it live, just like they were doing that Bennett thing. They do it live. He said, you can't beat two. Do you remember the part, Scott, where in the movie he goes, you can't beat 2 tracks. So he goes out there, he doesn't even have cans on, he just sings.
It's funny because I made my last 2 records with my band, the Brickyard Band record and the previous one, Ante Up. They were cut live on the floor with the rhythm section and me singing and playing live with no overdubs and no headphones.
That is awesome. When I saw that, when I saw him standing there with no cans on, I was like, well, this has just got to be for show.
Right. It's just going to be the video take of it. Yeah.
And then I was like, well, they must just have the monitors going, and he's somehow it's not bleeding through, right?
Right.
But then all of a sudden I see the cymbal move, because they were really focused on him and whoever was with him. The band was right there. I was like, oh my God, they're all in this room and he's just singing. And I saw some old footage and some old photographs of Frank Sinatra, and that's the exact way he would do it. And I was like, that's the coolest thing. I've never seen that before.
What I did with my band is I was in the ISO booth with the door open, and then the whole band is out in the room with my guitar amps.
So that way, so your vocal mic didn't get hit, right?
Yeah, and I mean, I some songs I would have the headphones on one ear, and some songs I'd have no headphones at all, depend on how loud we were going to play.
That's cool, man.
Yeah.
Well, that's also the Tom Dowd school, who recorded the Allman Brothers and so many other great artists for Atlantic, and I mean, that's the co-producer I've worked with for many years, Charlie Martinez, who did front of house sound for Steely Dan for a while. He recorded a bunch of Rolling Stones stuff, Keith Richards stuff. I mean, he's my partner, and we still produce other artists together. He's an amazing engineer, and he's from that school. I mean, he was an engineer for Rob Fraboni, and Fraboni basically taught him that Dowd school of it's all about standing in the middle of the room with the band and figuring out where the mics go. And that sounds really simple. That sounds like page 1. But actually, that's the only page. It's like you have to know how to stand in the room and get everything in the right place in the room, and then put the mics in the right place in the room, and then hit record. And it doesn't matter if it's tape or a computer or whatever. That's your job. And if you know how to do that, you're going to get a great sounding record. It doesn't matter how expensive the mics are or how expensive the amps are or whatever. You could just do it with anything and have that. I mean, it's the engineer is really important in capturing the sound and creating that environment, like what you saw with the Tony Bennett or the classic Frank Sinatra way of recording, or that's the way Ray Charles recorded and Miles Davis. They all recorded that way. And that's the school that, the engineers that engineered those records are the engineers who taught Tom Dowd. And Tom Dowd passed that into rock and roll.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that the more you isolate each guy, the more sterile it gets.
Oh, absolutely.
And it loses that vibe.
Yeah.
Because you listen to those old albums and it still conveys. You can still hear the heartbeat in it.
Not all bleed through is bad. I mean, it really does add to the final texture of the product, and I think a lot of times when that started to be completely gone and missed, it negatively affected things. I mean, they were theoretically perfect recordings, but is the sound perfect when you go out to see something live? Is everybody perfect when they're performing? No, it's
it's like we've said, auto-tune and time-align and all this stuff is just literally you're ripping off the fans.
Yeah,
you are. I mean, you're not giving them what is real.
I mean, people that aren't up to the caliber that can execute well enough in a studio in order to get it kind of quote unquote live, and in a take or two. Well, see, that's why there are so many more quote unquote stars nowadays.
Because they can't have
because everything's fixable in the mix. But back in the day when all the real roots guys were coming up, the brothers and the Santanas and everybody else we're talking about, the real players, real vocalists, and we're able to execute it in a couple of takes.
Yep.
And you take the best one and you move on to the next. You don't sit there for 6 months and mix one song. And
like
don't get me started.
Like JD said,
that's how I did my last 2 records, man. It's
that's
one or
cool.
2 takes of every song. And we had to overdub some horns and strings and things like that. But I mean, the meat of the song and the vocal takes and the guitar takes, they're 90% of them are live on the floor.
That's cool.
And that's when it feels the best, And if something is a hair off time wise, well,
who cares?
Maybe it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
Maybe it's supposed to feel that way. And if you made it perfect, you take something away from it. Music is feel. It's not a clock. It's feel.
What was it? The John Paul Jones and John Bonham. Mm-hmm. They always played like a little bit off of each other, and they said that was that real thing that Led Zeppelin had. Right. Was that little bit of weirdness.
It's cool when somebody's behind the beat just a little.
Just a little bit.
You guys just described every great rhythm section. I mean,
totally.
When I joined Gregg's band, I played with a lot of great ones. I mean, I could regale you guys with stories all day long about these groove experiences I had with Levon and also with Gregg's band, because when I joined Gregg's band, the bass player was Jerry Jamot. And Jerry's, I mean, I don't know how familiar you guys are with Jerry, but I mean, Jerry's on hundreds of classic records. I mean, he's on Aretha Franklin Live at the Fillmore West. He played on a bunch of Aretha's singles. I think he played on Think. He was part of the Muscle Shoals thing. But he was a New York guy. He was in King Curtis's band. So he's on all those King Curtis records. I mean, I knew Jerry backwards and forwards because Jerry was part of that rhythm section that was Bernard Purdie, Cornell Dupree, and Jerry Jamot. And I studied the crap out of Cornell and how he played with Bernard and Jerry. And when I started playing with Jerry, and our drummer in Gregg's band still is Steve Potts, who is Memphis music royalty. I mean, Al Jackson, I think, was his uncle or something from Booker T and the MGs.
Oh my God.
So he's played with Booker T and the MGs for over 20 years. So that was the rhythm section when I joined the band. So when I met those guys, I was like, damn, this is going to be unbelievable. And we had some incredible stuff going on with the groove. And I learned a lot from Jerry and about his style and how he came to it. And, honestly, when I talked to Jerry, I never felt like he really dug playing with Bernard. And I think that's why it's good, because every bass player, and I played with Bernard, and Bernard had the same kind of feel about Jerry, like, yeah, man, it was cool, it was all right, you ever hear this? And they talk about something else, and I was always kind of like, you know what, man, I don't think these cats dug playing together at all. And then I started noticing that I started hearing from other guys about how Al Jackson and Duck had a problem, and then I heard about how sometimes David Hood would get into it with certain drummers, and I started to realize, oh, this is the shit right here. You know, I've always known, I've always been told since the beginning, the groove is in the rub, and I've always experienced it with all my rhythm sections and putting records together. But when I saw Jerry and I got to know Jerry, I noticed it. And Levon, too, had a whole thing with that. Like, the way Levon would play, the first time I ever played with him, I was making a record with him, with his daughter, Amy, and it never ended up coming out, but it was a really fun session. And spent a day with him, and, you know, the way he played didn't make the first take we did. I was like, is something wrong? Because this doesn't even sound right to me. And he was playing with Byron Isaacs, his bass player, who's an amazing bass player. So I was thinking, well, it's Byron and Levon. I mean, it's got to be me, right? And I listened to it, and then I went and listened to the playback, and I said, this shit is killing. This sounds amazing. Like,
really,
it's totally, it's. Oh, I get it now. And then we went and did another take, and I started to understand how they were playing together. But rhythm sections, man, that's why that's my favorite part still to this day. I mean, I love to improvise, but, you know, playing the guitar, my favorite part of the night is always playing with the rhythm section. And Jerry Jamot called it the tripod: bass, guitar, and drums. The tripod. He's like, that's what everything rests on. And Jerry, you know, he taught me a lot of important lessons. He kind of put some names to the faces. You know, there were things that I did instinctually and I didn't know I was doing them. And he kind of explained to me, like, you know, you're doing this, right? And that's cool. And I started to realize, like, oh yeah, when you play the guitar, your right hand is like a tambourine, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the function of it.
Yeah,
like,
sure. Yeah.
You know, like you put a 16th note part or a quarter note part over what they're doing and you lock it in. That's a tambourine, you know? And then the bass is moving the, you know, it's moving the roots, but it's locking in with the kick drum, but it can't lock in too tight because then it's going to sound static. It's going to sound robotic.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's got to be a little offset. And then where does the snare come? And then, you know, Levon said to me in that session, we're doing a soul tune, and I was trying to do some Steve Cropper on 2 and 4, and he was like, no, man, those are my beats. Lay off 2 and 4. You know, don't play 2 and 4.
Wow.
Find your own beats. The snare's got to breathe for itself. You know, so there's all these tricks.
That's cool.
To listening, but it all comes down to listening. You know, it's like if you're crowding up his beats, you're probably, you know, I probably wasn't listening hard enough. You know.
Yeah.
But you got to learn how to pick up on those subtleties. It takes a lot of time, man. I'm constantly learning.
I was going to say, now you know, and now that's, you know, just another thing that you listen for.
Yep.
And know how to play with and play around, and you know. That just makes it so cool, man. Every time you play with somebody different, you should take something new away from it.
Yes,
you know?
And also, just a note to all bass players, when you go into band practice next time, just punch your drummer in the face, and then that way you get a little bit of tension going, and you'll be able to get that groove, right?
There you go.
You guys know that Captain Beefheart story, right?
No, but we're up for it.
Wait a minute.
He wasn't getting a take. He wasn't getting a take out of the band, and Captain Beefheart went into the live room, and he was trying to figure out what was wrong, and he was going through every guy, and he's like, nah, it's not the drums, not the guitar, and he goes, it's the bass. And he turns around and he cold cocks the bass player and knocks him flat out.
That'll get you a good take.
Well, that's, you know, there's a lot of, I'm sure there's a lot better Beefheart stories out there, but that's a good one about cold cocking somebody to get a take.
Well, sure. I wasn't too far off.
No, you weren't too far.
I try to do it in my band too, man. It's like if guys are too comfortable, it starts to get stale. You know, somebody's got to have a bug up their ass about something if you want to have a good sound.
Well, there's the lesson of the day, boys and girls.
Happy, man, it's just not going to be cool, man. You're not going to have you're not going to have the right vibe. Like, it's got to be, you know. And man, I tell you what, the stories I've heard about, you know, particularly again about the band and about the Allman Brothers, I mean, Jesus, you want to talk about constant tension, man. Just like, you know, and just like, you know, on the verge of killing each other, and then go out on stage and make, you know, one of the greatest records ever made live.
For
you
sure.
know?
Well, that kind of answers why Dickie's not in the band.
Well, that's, you know, that's a whole nother.
I was just going to say,
podcast.
Yeah,
that's,
exactly.
You know, well, I mean, look, even some of the best music out there, it has musical tension to it, you know. So
sure,
you know, if that has to come from some physical tension, what the hell, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, there shouldn't be a lot of it. You know,
just enough to make it interesting.
The band's over. You know, you got to have the right amount.
Just enough to make it interesting.
Yeah, don't slug one of your band members if you can avoid it.
No,
Yeah,
don't do anything Beefheart did. That's probably That's a good thing to start with.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? We're going to have to end with that.
Yes.
Because this, man, we could. I'm sure if we talked all night, there'd be another 6 dozen stories that we could all put out.
We never even got the guitars, but I'm just as happy to just talk about music.
I was going to say, before we go, I got to ask you, what's your axe now? What are you playing now? What do you play the most?
Well, luckily, I have a bunch of guitars, and I could go on, but the best guitar I've had since 2001, I've been playing. I call it my Swiss Army knife. It's my Gibson custom shop 336.
Wow.
And I got it new in 2001. My guitar tech here in New York, Paul Schwartz at Peekamoose, is phenomenal, and I've been with him since I moved here. He rewired it with high-grade speaker cable. I put some Seymour Duncan antiquities in there recently. It's got a master volume in the top of the F-hole. I've got Kluson locking tuners on it, and I've got pretty large frets that Paul put in there for me. They might be Dunlops. But otherwise, the guitar, is just, it's an amazing, for years I played 335 and a Tele, and I still have them, but this guitar sonically sits right there for me. And I love it, man. You can use it for anything, and it sounds perfect. So that's my main guitar. And then I got some, with Gregg, I got a Fano SP6 that I love. It's kind of like a mashup between a Les Paul Jr. and a Tele.
Oh, cool.
Okay.
I love the Harmony Bobcat for slide. And I play slide in standard most of the time, and usually just on my 336, but my buddy DeWitt Burton turned me on to these guitars. And they have the DeArmond gold foil pickups, and they are phenomenal guitars. Particularly for slide, but for anything really. And I have one of those. Mine's like a 64 Bobcat. I've got that out with Gregg. And then what else? That's about it. I got a 69 Strat that's pretty amazing that my dad's best friend from college sold to me many years ago. And I also, another interesting thing I have, and I've got a lot of stories about Steve Miller too, but I was on the road with Steve Miller and Gregg together, and Steve and I kind of hit it off, and he actually, I got home from my tour, and there was a FedEx box in the house, and I think my wife thought I'd bought a guitar. And I said, I wonder what that is. And I opened it up, and it's a Billy Bow. It's one of Billy Gibbons' guitars.
A Gretsch.
The Gretsch Billy Bow. And now I think this guy John Bolin makes them actually for him. And I emailed Steve, and I'm like, Steve, what is? I saw it came from you. What is this? And he's like, this was one of Billy's guitars, and he gave it to me, and I really enjoyed your playing, and I want you to have it.
Wow. Nice.
Pretty amazing guy.
Go, Mr. Miller.
We're still in touch. He's a lovely dude, but I've got that guitar, and I've used that on a lot of recordings too. It's pretty interesting guitar, and I have a bunch of other. I have probably about 20 guitars, I guess. I got some great acoustics too. My dad's 30s Martin. When I do record dates, I bring a lot. Like I'll bring my Firebird, and I've got an old airline guitar, Harmony Bobcat, the Gretsch 69 Strat, Tele. I've got a bunch of different amps, a bunch of Fender amps that I use. So it all depends. But with Gregg, it's mostly 80% of the gig is that 336.
Cool.
And then the Bobcat and sometimes the Fano. Those are the main guitars I'm using now. So
we're gonna keep an eye out for you. Actually, I think you're in town here in Baltimore in a few weeks. I think.
Yes.
So
well, hey guys, come on by.
Yeah, I think we might have to do that. And everybody else that's around the world, if the Gregg Allman show comes through, man.
Definitely
go see Scott. Yeah, for sure. Well, of course, go see Gregg, but see Scott.
This is a 9-piece band, man, and I'll tell you what, this band is just on fire. It is just positively on fire.
Nice.
You're going to have the time of your life. You're going to laugh, cry, dance. You're going to have a whole experience if you come see this band. And Gregg Allman is just singing his butt off. Just owning it, man. And it's really inspiring. We just did a show in Amsterdam. It was the day his mother passed away, and she was 98. But he really he really just came through and just gave the most amazing show, man. And you could just, I mean, we wanted to play all night. We did not want to get off stage.
Wow.
And the people were just, people were crying. I mean, it was pretty unbelievable because, he's played there very rarely. The U.S. we play a lot, but people should come down and, if nothing else, if you've never seen Gregg Allman live, you got to come. And if you've seen him with the brothers, you got to see him with his band because you're going to get to see him sing 16 songs.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, you're going to get a whole night of Gregg Allman singing. I mean, we play all the tunes, and we play some new stuff you're going to want to hear, and we're trying to make a studio record now. And I should also plug, the live album DVD. It's going to be on CD, DVD, vinyl, Blu-ray. It's coming out August 7th. Gregg Allman live in Macon. So that's coming out real soon.
Live in Macon. Excellent.
And cool. I'm playing on that. And, most of the band you're going to come see now is also represented on that DVD.
Nice. Well, everybody pick up the DVDs, the CDs, go buy the concert tickets.
The link will be on our website to Scott's for
perpetuity.
Yep. And don't forget, you guys or anyone who's listening, if you're in New York City on a Thursday, check out the schedule, and I might be there. Come down and say hi.
Yeah.
Have a mezcal,
Absolutely. And it's
called bar chord. And if you break a string, they have strings.
Yes.
They have strings, picks, guitars.
There you go. It's the ultimate gig. Hey, I need picks and strings. Well, you're here.
Right.
It's pretty fun, man. It's a fun place to hang.
And while you're here, have a drink and stay and see the band. I hear they're pretty good.
Yeah.
So there you go.
We're doing our best.
Awesome. Well, Scott, thank you so very much for taking the time. And tell, we'll let you know when this is up, and you can tell all your listeners and your fans, both real and virtual, that they got to give a listen to this because it's the life story of Mr. Scott Sharrard. So, hey, man. Thank you very much for giving it to us.
Man, thanks for having me, and thanks for doing this show, man. It's excellent.
Excellent.
Thank you, sir.
Glad you enjoy it, and have a great rest of the tour, and we will keep an eye out. I think, like I said, you're in Baltimore in a couple of weeks, so...
I should know this because my wife will be there.
Oh, okay. Well, you have... I'll get... One of us will contact you.
Yes.
And we'll come by and say hey.
Oh, yeah, you come down. We'll take care of you guys, man.
Awesome.
Cool.
All right, Scott, thank you again so much, and have a great rest of the evening, my friend.
Thanks, you too.
Well, and there you have the story.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That guy's 38. He's played with everybody.
I know. And he's been like...
I feel like I haven't done anything with my life.
He's lived in a half a dozen states and had successful music experiences in all of them just about, and and now he's playing with Mr. Allman and got his own thing going on and living in New York. I think it's called living the dream.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and the audio started to degrade there at the end. It's we're always at the mercy of whatever we're using.
I know.
And but just the soul that he has, a young guy like that. I mean, I say young guy. He's 10 years younger than me, but it's refreshing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And he like you said, steeped in the blues, born and steeped in the blues and into jazz. And actually, I think that's kind of, I kind of like, I have total respect for jazz players because it's something that I am, if I know three chords that I could play within a jazz setting, it would get me by for about 30 seconds and then I'd have to go home. And, but I really have total respect for jazz players, but I think there's a little more quote unquote soul to them if they really can play blues too. I just think it makes it a little warmer. And he's got that shit covered.
Yes. Yeah.
So that's awesome. That
Absolutely.
is awesome. So go see him if Mr. Allman comes around to your town.
Yeah.
And we will do, or by the time this is up, have done the same. And maybe we'll give you a second report on Mr. Scott Sharrard.
Yes, sir.
And Greg.
So until next time, my friend.
Of course.
I'm Mick Marcelino.
I'm Jeff Bober.
And we're always I can't even. And we're always saying
onward.
Be sure and follow the show on Twitter @AmpsandAxes. Also, make sure you like the show on Facebook. For news, comments, and everything else, visit the webpage, ampsandaccesscast.com. Thanks for listening.